At 1:47 a.m., deep within Montana's Rocky Mountains, a retired Navy SEAL was jolted awake by a knock slicing through the roaring blizzard outside his isolated cabin. No traveler stood there, no lost hiker or curious neighbor. Instead, a battered German Shepherd K9 waited in the snow, pregnant, injured, frozen to the brink of collapse. Opening the door meant stepping back into a life he believed he had escaped. Closing it meant abandoning lives that still had a chance. The choice he made would uncover truths powerful people believed were buried forever. What would you have done? And if stories of courage, faith, and compassion matter to you, subscribe now, because some lives are saved the moment we refuse to turn away. Snow had fallen relentlessly for hours, smothering the mountains in silence and pressing the darkness tight against Luke Harris's cabin, hidden among towering pines. Luke slept lightly, the way men trained to survive never fully relax. At 39, his broad frame still carried the strength of years in service. A neatly kept beard lined his jaw, faint streaks of gray betraying burdens time alone couldn't explain. His hair, cropped short by habit, rested dark against the pillow. The knock didn't startle him, it tightened something deep in his chest. The sound was deliberate, too solid to be wind, too heavy to be chance. Luke lay still, counting breaths, listening as the fire settled in the stove. Then came another knock, slower, uneven. He rose, boots already within reach, calm settling over him the way it always had before, moments that changed everything. The cabin was sparse but intentional. Luke moved through it without switching on a light, his tall silhouette threading between the table and stove. Years earlier, hesitation had cost lives overseas, and arriving too late had cost him more than he admitted. Those lessons shaped him, capable but distant, polite yet withdrawn, a man who kept the world at arm's length. He pulled on his worn canvas jacket and reached for the door latch. His hand paused against the scarred wood as the storm hissed outside like a held breath. For a moment, he considered stepping back, letting the night keep its secrets. Then something familiar stirred inside him. Luke opened the door. Cold exploded inward, snow whipping sideways, stinging his face. At first there was only darkness, then the shape took form. A German Shepherd stood at the threshold, massive even in exhaustion. Frost clung to her sable coat. One leg shook unnaturally, dried blood staining her fur. Steam rose from her shallow breaths. She didn't bark. She didn't whine. She simply waited, like this door was the final coordinate she had been given. Luke crouched slowly, careful not to startle her, his movements controlled and deliberate. Up close, the damage was impossible to ignore. Pale scars crossed beneath her thick fur, marks of restraints and harsh training. Around her neck, raw scar tissue formed a cruel ring where a collar had once cut too deep. When his gloved hand brushed her side, he felt it instantly, the firm, rounded swell of her abdomen. His breath caught. A powerful contraction rippled through her body. Her muscles locked, a low sound escaping before she forced it back into silence. She was pregnant. This was no accident. Luke pulled his hand away, heart pounding, not with fear but recognition. No wounded animal wandered through a blizzard by chance. This was intent carried on failing legs, driven by training and instinct stronger than pain. Her strength finally gave out. She swayed. Luke moved without hesitation. One arm slid beneath her chest, the other under her hindquarters as her heavy body collapsed into his hold. She was solid muscle, far heavier than she looked and utterly spent. His boots slipped once on packed snow, and for a split second he feared they would both fall. Then his footing held. He carried her inside and kicked the door shut behind them. The latch snapped into place, sealing the storm out. Silence rushed in, thick and startling. Luke lowered her carefully near the hearth, easing her onto the wooden floor. Her sides heaved, breaths uneven and shallow. He knelt beside her, one hand braced on the floor, the other hovering, unsure where help would do more good than harm. Firelight flickered across her face. Her eyes were sharp, alert, not pleading but assessing. There was intelligence there. And something else, measured trust. Luke swallowed hard. He had seen that look before. Men pinned under wreckage. Teammates who knew the odds and refused to waste breath on fear. He slid a blanket beneath her and added a log to the stove. Sparks leapt as heat bloomed through the room. Another contraction seized her body, stronger this time. She tried to curl inward, breath tearing free before she bit it back. Luke leaned closer, his voice low and steady. "You're safe," he said, though the words were as much for himself as for her. Outside, the storm raged without mercy. Inside, a different kind of fight had begun. Luke worked by firelight, movements slow and precise. He trimmed fur around her injured leg, exposing torn flesh darkened by frozen blood. The wound was brutal but clean enough to treat. He rinsed it with warmed water, hands steady despite the cold biting into his skin. She never snapped. Never flinched. Her jaw tightened, eyes fixed on nothing, enduring pain with disciplined silence. This wasn't instinct alone, it was training refined until quiet became reflex. As Luke wrapped the leg, his fingers brushed her neck again, feeling the rope-like scar tissue beneath her fur. He exhaled slowly. Whoever had handled her last had shown no mercy. And whoever sent her into this storm never expected her to survive. Another contraction surged through her without warning. Luke felt it beneath his palm as her abdomen tightened, muscles drawing hard before releasing in a shudder that traveled down her spine. A strained sound escaped her throat before she swallowed it back, eyes narrowing with effort. Luke froze, counting the seconds automatically, the way he once had beside wounded men on distant ground. Too fast. Too intense. He shifted closer, layering blankets beneath her, keeping her warm without restricting her movement. His thoughts raced ahead of his hands, hypothermia, blood loss, labor beginning before her body had recovered. And beneath it all, a truth he could no longer ignore. She was a female K9. Pregnant. In the programs Luke had known, that alone would have marked her as expendable. Pregnancy wasn't seen as life, it was seen as failure. He fed another log into the stove. Firelight flared, carving sharp lines across his face, deepening the marks time and memory had left behind. Briefings echoed in his mind, cold language stripped of humanity. Assets. Output. Viability. He had once accepted those terms. Believed they were necessary. Kneeling beside this dog, silent through pain, disciplined to the bone, the words tasted bitter. The past pressed in hard. A mission long ago. A delayed extraction. A man left behind because recovery was deemed too costly. Luke had lived. The other man hadn't. He'd left the service soon after, believing distance would dull the weight of it. It hadn't. The K9 shifted, dragging her injured leg slightly as instinct guided her into a better position. Luke moved with her, one hand near her flank, the other ready to steady her head. He spoke softly, not commands, not reassurance, just presence. Easy, he murmured, though nothing about this was easy. Her eyes flicked to him, sharp despite exhaustion. She was calculating, conserving energy, waiting. Luke felt something tighten in his chest. He had trained dogs like her before, admired their loyalty and precision. But this was different. She wasn't meant to survive this. Another wave of pain hit. Luke cleaned a deep gash along her shoulder, working carefully around frozen blood and torn flesh. She endured it without sound. When his hand brushed her belly again, he felt movement beneath the stretched skin. Life. Luke closed his eyes briefly, steadying his breath. This was no longer just about saving a dog. This was about refusing to measure worth the way he once had. Hours later, far below the mountain, a quiet veterinary clinic glowed under fluorescent lights. Sarah Mitchell sat alone at her desk, long past closing time. In her late 30s, tall and lean, she carried the kind of strength built from endurance rather than comfort. Dark hair streaked with early silver was pulled into a loose knot. Her eyes, focused and restless, scanned her laptop screen. Missing records. Incomplete reports. Female K9 units listed as retired with no explanation. She had seen this pattern before. Years earlier, while contracted to a military K9 program, Sarah had discovered a sedated female shepherd scheduled for decommission after being flagged pregnant. The dog's eyes had met hers briefly before the order was carried out beyond her control. Sarah had resigned within weeks. Now the same quiet erasure was happening again. And one signal, faint, unstable, still blinked on her screen, pointing deep into the mountains. Alive. The wind surged again just after midnight, driving snow hard against the cabin walls and rattling the windows as if the mountain itself leaned in to witness what was happening inside. Luke noticed the change in her breathing before the next contraction struck. Each inhale grew shorter, sharper, pulled from deep within her chest with visible effort. Her body locked, abdomen tightening like a drawn wire. A strained sound slipped free before she forced it back, jaw clenched, eyes fixed ahead. Luke stayed beside her, boots forgotten, knees aching against the floor, hands steady despite the tension climbing in his chest. He fed the stove until the fire threw real heat and spread fresh blankets beneath her. He had no training for this, no manuals, no procedures. What he had was presence and the refusal to step away. When the contraction eased, her body sagged, breath shuddering. Luke swallowed hard. This was happening now. There would be no waiting. The first pup arrived quietly, almost unnoticed. Luke froze for a heartbeat, then saw the small dark shape, slick and trembling. He moved gently, clearing the airway with the edge of a blanket, rubbing until a thin, fragile sound filled the room. "Wife." The canine turned her head weakly, nose brushing the pup with instinctive precision. Luke placed the pup against her belly, watching it root blindly toward warmth. The moment hit him harder than any impact he remembered. He stayed still, letting it happen. The second contraction followed quickly. She pushed again, claws scraping faint lines into the wood. Luke braced her head with his arm, murmuring low sounds without instruction, only proof she wasn't alone. The second pup emerged smaller, weaker. Luke worked fast, rubbing until its chest fluttered, then rose and fell. 2 lives breathing. Relief washed through him so sharply his vision blurred. By the third contraction something was wrong. Her breaths were too shallow, too far apart. Her head lifted once, then dropped hard against the floor. Panic flared sharp and unwelcome. This was the moment Luke knew too well, the moment when effort failed and time slipped away. "Stay," he whispered, the word stripped of command. The third pup emerged slowly, dangerously so. Luke worked with frantic care, clearing, counting, rubbing. Then air. A gasp. He let out a broken sound, half laugh, half sob, and placed the pup beside the others. 3 lives. The mother did not move. Luke pressed his palm flat against her ribs, searching for motion. Heat was there. Rhythm was not. Memory crashed in, wreckage, silence, a chest that never rose again. His jaw clenched hard enough to ache. Then, beneath his hand, her chest lifted. Shallow. Uneven. But real. Luke sagged back on his heels, hands shaking openly now. The canine stirred, dragging herself closer to the pups, her body forming a shield around them by instinct alone. Outside, the storm continued without mercy. Inside, Luke stayed on the floor beside her, knowing with quiet certainty that this night had changed everything. He had not arrived too late. Not this time.